Thank you, Shabbar. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Really excited about this topic. I think it's a timely one. We are, hopefully in the midst of a revolution with AI and machine learning, and we want to use this opportunity to talk about how we see enterprises completely pivoting and adapting to a new world where they're building machine learning and AI-based apps to run their business. Is everyone able to see the screen correctly?
Yep, I can see your screen.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Jump to the next slide. So we're going to cover a little bit of background of who the company is. And before I do that, I want to introduce myself and my co-speaker, Raphael, here. So I am Vinod Iyengar. I head global customer success here at H2O and also help drive new product development. I've been in the company for about 5 years and played a whole bunch of different roles, but most recently, my current responsibility is working with all of our customers across the world. So I get a sort of a first-hand view of how customers are adapting to the new world, how they are bringing AI to the enterprises, how they are building models, putting them into production, what kind of change management they're going through, how are organizations and leaders thinking about this AI transformation as it's happening. So really excited to share some of those sort of nuggets and themes that we see across the industry. And my co-speaker is Raphael, of course. I'll let him introduce himself.
Hi, folks. This is Raphael. I am also very excited to talk about this topic. Vinod and I have going sort of back and forth to kind of see how we can help folks better understand sort of the role of AI apps and kind of really how to kind of take your AI transformation to the next level. So at H2O, I've been here for about 2 years, and like Vinod, playing multiple roles. Currently focused around technical marketing, community, and kind of helping drive solution engineering in Latin America. So, yeah, looking forward to this.
Thank you, Raphael. All right, so let's jump in. Oops. So let's look at who's H2O, right? So we've been in business for about 9 years now. Our vision is to democratize AI, and our mission is to use AI for good. That translates to every step of the everything we do. We start off as an open source community project. We are been in business for over 9 years, but the first 5 to 6 years of the company, we were primarily a 100% open source company, and our H2O platform and sparkling water platforms are used really widely across the data science space. Over 200,000 data scientists use us on a regular basis, 20,000 plus companies globally use us. And that's sort of one of the key missions, right? So to democratize means that we need to give the best tools to everyone who wants to access it. So making it available completely free and open to the community so that they can not just build the models or use the platform, but also tweak it, adapt it, enhance it, and make it their own. That is extremely critical for us. And along the way, we worked with a lot of large enterprises, small and medium as well, become their trusted partners in their AI transformation journey. And then in parallel, we continue to contribute to the social good as well, wherever we can, with our sort of AI for Good program. We work with universities, we work with academia. We also work with a lot of nonprofits to help them use AI to solve critical problems. So from a startup perspective, we are still a fairly small company. We have about 240 folks established in 2012. We are headquartered in Mountain View, California. But even before the pandemic, we wanted to always be a diverse global company. So we have offices in New York, London, Paris, Ottawa, Prague, Chennai, and Singapore. But now, in the new sort of world, we are all remote, and we built this company to be a truly diverse company, a truly global company that has the best talent from all over the world. We are venture-backed. Our investors include folks like Goldman Sachs, Pingan Ventures, Wells Fargo, Media, Nexus, and others. We have sort of 3 major platforms. We'll talk about one of them in a little bit more detail down the line, but essentially we have an open source machine learning platform, H2O Core and Sparkling Water. Then H2O Driverless AI is our flagship AutoML platform, and then Q is a new platform for business users and AI app development framework. We have a ton of customers across the board, all continents. We have customers in all the different continents except Antarctica, across different verticals, and we're really excited about all the ways our customers use our product and get value. And one of the things we are really proud about is some of the talent. So we have close to 10% of the world's Grandmaster talent, including I think about 3 of the top 10 who work for us currently. And we have the world number 1, the former world number 1, and a few others as well. We have, and these are distributed throughout the world, right? So we have folks all over the world, from Europe, Asia, North America, of course. And these folks are building some of the most amazing products out there so they are essentially helping drive a product, but also work with customers to bring the best talent out there to help solve the problems. From an industry perspective, we work with across financial services, healthcare, life sciences, healthcare, and marketing, and retail. We are a pretty, horizontal company, but we have had a lot of success with these verticals. And you can see there's a plethora of use cases. We work across the board with, on the financial services side, things like fraud detection, money laundering, credit scoring, etc. And then life sciences, we do all kinds of use cases with payers, providers, pharma companies, and also with drug chains. Same thing with telco and retail. So there's a lot of use cases we work across the board, and it's all possible because of the platform we bring to the table, but also customers being able to use our platform to do really cool, interesting things. These are some of the logos, so a small snippet of the logos across the board. Some really big brand names like, Wells Fargo, Capital One, Coca-Cola, Merck, P&G, so on. So really big brands, and some really cool technology companies as well. We work with a lot of fast-growing startups, fast-growing technology companies as well, and also with like large old enterprises which have been in business for close to 100 years or more, right? So we have a breadth of experience being able to work with all these different companies. In addition, our open source platform does get used, is used by over close to half of the Fortune 500, including a lot of the top 10 banks, insurance, and healthcare companies. So with that, let's turn to the topic on hand, which is about AI apps, right? So, AI apps is basically the sort of the new frontier, right? So it's not just sufficient to build models, but how do these models get used? So the notion of AI applications driving the change at the enterprise or transformation enterprise is what we are really seeing. And what does it look like today? So essentially, we think there's 3 pieces. First is the data, second is the AI, and third is the people. So you need to bring all of them together to basically be able to do transformations. And so a lot of the time, the focus is, of course, on the technology, the AI part. People are always looking at the next best, next coolest library out there or the technology. That's important, and that's what drives all innovation. But as important, if not more, is the data that goes in. And again, I would argue that most enterprises have realized this and have started investing in their data infrastructure, at least capturing all the data. Basically, a decade plus of the big data movement, including Hadoop and others, has basically taught people the value of data. But unfortunately, a lot of the customers haven't been able to realize the value. So they've built these huge data lakes, but the big wins, promises were not kept. So our goal is to figure out how do we do that, right? So obviously, data plus AI is a big part of how we can achieve, unlock some of the potential and value from the data for the customers, both on their operational side, but also on new product development. But the third biggest piece to all of this is the people, right? We need to be able to bring the right set of people. Our CEO always says, AI is a team sport, right? So that means that you need to have the right set of folks on your team, the data scientists, the data engineers, the app developers, the DevOps folks, and the business users who are going to make additions based on the output of these AI models. So all these need to come together, and an organization needs to sort of transform itself to achieve the ultimate value out of AI. So from that perspective, I think our goal has been that, to see how do we enable the existing modern sort of machine learning lifecycle, right? But take that and essentially expand that to being able to generate thousands of applications, right? This is hence the title, right? Raise a forest of apps, like just a few trees. It's not just sufficient. I mean, most enterprises will start off with a few models in production, one or two wins, quick wins, and that's good. But eventually, truly for transformed organizations will have thousands of their own apps across the enterprise, with lots of data being shared, the signals being passed across each department groups and all the users, right? So it's a very the classic hive mind, right? So to get a single hive mind, you need basically a forest of apps which are all sharing the same infrastructure, sharing the same intelligence across the organization. So what that means is that to be able to do that, there is a few pieces that start coming up. So if you start listing it out, obviously need the ability to rapidly provision and experiment, right? So rapid experimentation is critical. You need to be able to have a DevOps or an infrastructure pipeline that allows you to capture all of these pieces, bring them together, and have a really solid culture and pipeline that allows for the collaboration and the easy deployment of models, easy building of model, provisioning of instances, infrastructure, having access to all the hardware you need on demand. And obviously, some of this is possible when you do it on cloud. But more importantly, you should be able to do this even on-prem, right? So that's no excuse for not being able to do it. Having security and privacy and all those pieces being part of the design from a first principle perspective, thinking about them. And then more importantly, having the ability to do this at scale for volume. So not just do it one app at a time, but do hundreds of apps, if not thousands, all at once. So creating those basic building blocks, first principles across the organization to allow for a rapid prototyping of all these applications is critical. So from that perspective, I think what are we, just if you drill into the essential sort of the automation pipeline, if you will, right? So within just the machine learning part of it, you're talking about the classic machine learning workflow, which is starting with bringing the data together, doing the ETL, the data prep, the aggregation, the augmentation, to essentially bring the right kind of data sources together, and then start building the models. And as you're doing this, you can take advantage of all the automatic machine learning tools that have been built by us and others, let's say, but to rapidly iterate and to create a lot of models, validate those models. So then the next part is being actually able to check for robustness, explain the results, understand if the results make sense, back test it, do regression testing on it if needed, check against, run some adversarial tests if needed, right? Do all kinds of checks if possible to check for bias. And then once you feel confident about the model you have in hand, then we'll go through the deployment lifecycle. So building the infrastructure for doing that seamlessly, and then monitoring it. As the models that get deployed will get constantly monitored for drifts, for changes in data, changes in the model performance. And there is a real-time feedback loop then, which essentially allows you to update or learn from the results in production to enrich the model and rerun the cycle, basically. And this can, over time, this should be completely automated, where this process keeps happening all the time, with humans just coming in to check in and ensure that nothing is going out of bounds. So if you think about expand that for a little minute, right? So if you think about this notion of signal as a service, and one of our leaders, Finney and Gardner, put this really nice concept that if you think about your sort of operational backbone, right? So this is what delivers your core business sort of functionality, right? Across the organization, your data is all coming in from standard data sources, source systems, going to your data lakes, your sort of OLAP systems. And from there, typically, this is where a lot of the first generation sort of machine learning happens, right? So most people will start with taking the data from the data lake, running modeling on it, using libraries or platforms like H2Os to build a bunch of models, and then they'll try to see if those models can be deployed for internal-facing users, right? So this is typically where most enterprises start build models for internal users. So if you build a fraud model, you're building it for the fraud analyst in your organization, or you're building a credit model for the credit analyst, or for the customer success person or customer support person. You give them like a churn model. These apps are used to improve your efficiency. So these are typically focused on improving your existing fraud models or fraud losses, or reducing your credit risks, or improving your customer experience, right? So these are part of your operational backbone, and that's a good place to start because it's tangible. It's a little safe because you still have the human in the loop, because the decisions you are giving those model results to your internal users, who in turn will make decisions for you based on the output of these models. And then over time you get better, you get the muscle running, right? So this is a very good place for most organizations to start from how to get into, right? So start with this part. But once you do that, you have the backbone all lined up. You can start using some of those pieces to drive your digital platform. So this is your front end, right? This is what is interfacing to your external customers. And it's a key difference because what applications or what frameworks is built for the external users are often sort of disparate. Like there is a delta because you're there from the technology perspective too. So you're looking at OLTP processes, you are looking at real-time engines, you're looking at web stacks or mobile stacks, which have a lot of requirements on latency. The UX or usability is key. So it's built with a completely different framework. But once you have this operational backbone in place, you can start using internal APIs and signals being passed back and forth to improve your user experience as well. And you can see this all the time, right? The big tech companies, all the great modern tech internet giants, all use this. You will see really, like if you go to, you can use your Amazon recommendation or Netflix recommendation, you see that happening. Right? Your models, are all in real, sort of like in plain view. They are changing your behavior. They are impacting your behavior. They are giving you a better user experience. And that's possible. That's when you unlock true value, because now you're truly not just improving your operational efficiencies, but actually generating new value, net new value from your user experience. And to do that, this is sort of the first step we talked about, improving the operational platform. But because they are linked by the data, you can then start to bring that signal to your digital platform as well. And then basically, if you think about like a next-gen platform, you have like essentially a fully bidirectional, seamless sort of next-gen platform where your intelligence is flowing across the organization, whether it's for the operational backbone use cases or for the digital transformation use cases, right? Everywhere across the organization, you have the single hive mind where all signal is being shared transparently, they are being updated. So for example, imagine if you are a bank and you have a shared common sort of customer score, right? Customer satisfaction score that is available every time you ask for the customer record. So every user in the organization, whether it's on the customer success side or on the marketing side, or even on the credit scoring side, they all get a single view, right? And you might imagine, what's the big challenge in that? And we find that, because for large organizations, getting the data together itself is a big problem, right? Not to mention being able to pass these scores or pass these intelligence components across the organization. So that's the big part I want to get to, right? So if you build a backbone to do this, then you can essentially share all of these signals across all the apps that you're going to talk about later. So I just want to sort of leave you with that thought before we get to the next step. So with that said, now let's look at what the AI lifecycle then looks like, right? So we talked about the steps around data exploration, augmentation to modeling and validation testing, deployment, drift monitoring, and then app development, right? App integration, APIs, all those. And you can see the personas, right, that you have to touch. So again, going back to the original theme of AI as a team sport, you will need all these users to come together and be able to collaborate very easily, more importantly, right? So with a shared single mission of building AI apps and building not just one, but hundreds of these apps. So you need standard systems, you need processes, and a lot of this is already done, right? So we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Software development best practices are available for us to sort of borrow from. And we're going to do that, right? We want to ideally do that when we are getting into this AI app development frameworks as well. So we want to pick frameworks which support that, which fit well there. and allows us to basically bring in our data, use the signals from data to the wider organization. And then, yeah, you can start building these loops that can start coming in and then improving your workflow. As we go back and forth, these can the signals can keep passing between every step. You have common APIs that allow us to do that, and this whole life cycle is continuously evolving, improving, and making better. So to do that, we have a whole bunch of platforms and products in place. So we have the H2O product suite, which includes H2O Contained Water for machine learning, big data machine learning, and we have H2O Driverless AI, which is our automatic machine learning platform for the enterprise, which does everything from feature engineering, modeling to interpretability in a fully automated way. And then we have Q, our integrated app development platform, which we'll talk about in a little bit. All of that allows customers, and then model ops, of course, to help manage, deploy, and monitor models. But bringing them all together allows every enterprise to essentially have their own marketplace. They can build their own app marketplace, if you will, of their own internal apps that are available for every user within an organization. So let's say you're in a bank, every bank employee will have access to these apps so that they can start getting those decisions, these intelligence components for use and repurposing for their own decision management. Okay. Raphael, I don't know if you want to chime in, feel free to jump in. And then, yeah, so from the lifecycle perspective, these are how, from the, just tie back to the origin of the previous slide, these are how all our tools will hopefully fit in, including Q, Driverless AI, Model Ops, through all these processes to build apps, to provide the framework for these apps, doing the Model Ops for the end-to-end lifecycle management, and then Driverless AI, H2 for the actual model development. And we did this a few times now, right? So we have experience now. So we learned by doing this the hard way, which is doing this all manually. So one of our biggest partners in this journey has been PwC, which is one of the largest customers and partners, where they were trying to completely transform audit as the whole auditing space, right? So the first product we built with them, or after working for many years, was a product called Agile.ai, which essentially won the Audit Innovation of the Year award in 2017. And this basically help save them years of errors or audit risks. And essentially, it's an AI app built in conjunction with a partner, but we had to do it all manually. We built it all from scratch, including the UX, the user interface, how the feedback loops are going to work. We learned this and we got better when we built the second app with them, which is Cash.ai. And this again won the Audit Innovation of the Year award, right? So this is basically an app that is built for looking at anomalies in your ledgers, in your transactions, in your entire cash flow across the organization to improve audit qualities. And these are all live. These are live with customers and large enterprises across the world. So what we learned from that is that, hey, this is what the end outcome is going to look like. This is how AI is going to be consumed. But how do we do this in a more repeatable, scalable fashion? So you don't want to spend years on each app. What will it take to build this lot of apps? And that's kind of what led us in this journey of to develop Q, but also think about app development as a way to enable consumption of AI across organization. Okay, so then I'm going to pass it to Raphael to talk about what it takes to build these apps and what are the challenges.
Yeah, thanks, Vinod. So as we're sort of thinking through like this whole notion of democratizing AI and making AI, accessible to everyone, and part of that is we want to fuel at the end this, help companies and make every company into an AI company, which is helping them in their digital transformation journey and take that next step, right? But in order to get there, that AI transformation needs a next generation apps, right? In the sense of, yes, you can do the machine learning and build these models that kind of, instead of doing mass branding, looking at an individual experience, and instead of being reactive, being able to be proactive. But the model's not enough, right? Deploying the model might not be enough, right? Because at the end, if you want to have this, pervasive next generation applications, they need to sort of also become embedded within your applications, right? To be able to kind of provide that personalized healthcare or, that dynamic yield optimization. This needs to go permeate all the way into the apps. So can you go to the next slide, Vinod? And so as we kind of look at, this whole notion of next generation apps, the analysts are seeing a similar trend, right? Where, Gartner is talking about a composable enterprise, right? Forrester is talking about an adaptive enterprise. And as you look at, these notions, like, yes, they talk about ERPs and CRMs and those systems becoming sort of, more flexible, more composable. But a key theme within both of these is AI needs to become embedded, right? AI and the capability in AI needs to become agile within your applications, right? And as folks are enhancing, embedding, and developing new applications, we really need to look at streamlining the development from the end user interface to the building of the machine learning models and feeding that back into sort of models that are deployed and insights, right? And making that something that's native as folks think about AI apps. So next slide, Vinod. So as we look at sort of this evolution or sort of this journey that these many companies are going, and if you could build out the slide, Vinod, what we're going to start seeing is, folks are going to start creating their initial AI apps or starting the experimentation into ML. They figure out how to scale their ML efforts or streamline the ML leveraging something like automatic machine learning, right? And then, as they do more in these, maybe initially their consumption is batch, right? And they're generating some reports or they're generating, something, but at some point, you're going to take this next major transformation step is kind of integrating that into applications, right? And at some point, you can get to this sort of nirvana or that next step of being this adaptive enterprise, where now, as sort of, the node is mentioning, it's like, your operational and your digital systems are now sort of infused with AI. So next slide, Vinod. So as you start looking at, building an AI app, right, there's all these potential bottlenecks, right? There's, bottlenecks initially of, getting your data and preparing that. So go ahead and build that out, Vinod. So there's, preparing your data, and then you might kind of go to the next step of, hey, I want to figure out how to build my machine learning models and maybe automate some of that. And then you go back, and then you're going to get to the point of, okay, I need to deploy that model, right? And then it's the app itself, right? So if we're really going to look at sort of a holistic view of how AI is going to transform it, you really need to start attacking each one of these, right? And many folks tend to be very focused on, okay, let me prepare the data, let me build my models, let me deploy my models. But if your deployed model never makes it into an application that is consumed by a massive amount of folks, you're not going to take that transformation step in making that company into an AI company, right? Because AI is going to be sort of still relegated to the few, right? And that democratization is not. You're not going to get there, right? So we really want to try to take a more holistic view of the whole, of all the various components and what it takes to kind of go streamline that sort of end to end, right? So if we look at the next slide, the other thing that's really happening is that, there's this AI app impedance mismatch, right? Where, there's a traditional world of building applications, and from a data perspective, it's very sort of transactional oriented, dealing with relational databases, dealing with transactions, and then you have these developers that have their tool suites around things like JavaScript, CSS, and HTML, and are using frameworks like Node.js, React, Angular, and such, Flask, to Django. And then if they want to present some data, maybe they can present a table, maybe they do some basic visualizations, but it can kind of get sort of limited, right? And then you have like the classic way of kind of presenting or working with data in analytics, which is BI, right? So, and there was definitely a major step forward, but again, that still doesn't typically understand machine learning, right? And more of these BI systems are trying to add BI, that's talking about augmented analytics, right? But they still tend to work with historical data, the data warehouse, use SQL. They have some static dashboards where you can kind of filter and do some selection, right? But AI is not necessarily a core component of that. And then as sort of Vinod is mentioning, that there's this whole rich data. So it's not just transactional data, but you also have video and audio and text, right? And you have as you look at trying to be adaptive, it's not just you're living in this batch world in applications. Like folks are really trying to think about how do I do this sort of in real time with streaming, right? This whole notion of the Internet of Things, it's a streaming world that's going to happen. And how do I take machine learning and all the insights from machine learning and kind of embed that within that kind of those systems, right? And lastly, we have AI, where the data scientists work on a data science workflow. They're maybe leveraging AutoML. They maybe work with notebooks, right, where they're sort of doing their analysis and they can see their visualizations. But that's not something that end users or web developers typically work with, right? And then the final AI app, it's not just consuming one model. It could be consuming a whole collection of models. So you can have a model that's looking at, hey, I want to predict churn. Okay, this person is going to churn, this person is not going to churn. Great. Now you have another model that says, what's my next best action? So it's not just one model, but a collection of models that maybe an application needs to work with. And clearly, this all needs to sort of be deployed. So as we look at these challenges and how do we try to streamline that, there's also the way that all this gets sort of communicated. So if you go to the next slide, Vinod. So as folks want to communicate insights, right? Again, traditionally it's like people could kind of work with some kind of spreadsheet or work with building some PowerPoints for folks to kind of understand the insights. But this is not going to give you that adaptive streaming sort of capability, right? And then these tools aren't necessarily built from the perspective of machine learning, right? They're more like, oh, I want to deal with historical perspective, right? And you can try to communicate those insights via email, but then you get people with massive amounts of different reports and different versions to try to figure out what's happening, and it's not very consumable or interactive, right? So then you could say, oh, I want to build this desktop web app, but gee, that could be a huge investment, and again, we have that impedance mismatch of being able to consume that, right? And that BI dashboard has sort of a similar feel. You could try to take an existing data science notebook and hope that somehow that's consumable by non-data scientists, but I think many of us can quickly tell, the end user might not be able to just consume your shared data science notebook, right? It's not what they're sort of expecting. So go ahead, go to the next slide, Vinod. So as we look at sort of the maturity or the journey of this, AI transformation, right? Vinod and I did a webinar maybe a month or two back, talking about the AI journey, right? And kind of walk through each step. But if let's just focus on like step two, trying to operationalize this and kind of looking at that scale effort. So go to the next slide, Vinod. So as we look at, try to take that to an operational level, yeah, clearly there's the data science, the data engineering, the deployment that's sort of necessary in kind of working with this, right? But there also is clearly the need to take that and kind of work with the application team, right? And so wouldn't it be great if somehow there was a tool where I could go from my data science notebook and I can kind of publish it into a web, or I can potentially try to embed these insights more easily into what is sort of a web framework and try to streamline. Somehow if the app development had a better native understanding of the frameworks or of the flow in AI, and be able to kind of present that more easily and kind of reduce the amount of code, make it easier to develop these apps, have sort of better sort of data visualizations that you can kind of put into a web framework, right? And so that's really what we're hoping to kind of get to with our sort of next generation of AI apps and solutions. So go ahead to the next slide, and I think now I'm going to transition it back to Vinod to look at how we're trying to address some of these challenges.
Thank you, Raphael. So let's think about what kind of apps you want to build, right? So we started, like I said, building some of these core apps ourselves over many years, and this is actually a slide from many years ago when he said, hey, you want to build all these apps, right? Like a churn analysis apps or like a fraud detection app, predictive modeling factory, right? And he said we'll help them do that with the models, but we realized that we needed an entire app development framework to do it. So that's how we started building Q. So Q is an entire app development framework slash platform, which is built to quickly, rapidly prototype apps, but also be able to productionize them for different verticals, right, at scale. So it has a lot of pieces built in. So it comes in an SDK for app building, but it can also then come into like essentially build your own app store. And that's what you want to get to, right? Every company essentially having their own app store internally. And some of the apps we were thinking about, right? So there is on the financial services side, you think like credit scoring or collections or cash flow risk, lending, anti-money laundering. And these are all specific use cases essentially, right? But if you sort of extend that to say who's the user on that organization, so that if there is a credit analyst on the other end, the machine may not be data scientist, they might but still want to play with the data, right? So giving them an interactive app that gets the results or the predictions from the AI model, but put it in an interactive fashion, but they can start making decisions with it, and also help improve the model, provide feedback loop. That's what we want to do, right? So we want to build these apps to essentially across organization offer all kinds of benefits. Similarly, on the healthcare side, thinking about building apps for like things like ICU sepsis management prediction or hospital management, survival analysis, etc. Right? Or the actual users on the insurance side, and there's a bunch of things in different domains. So there is no sort of limitation, and in the end, we want this to be a community project where we expect our customers and community to build hundreds, if not thousands, of apps, which will all be geared towards specific problems. Because then you can bring in the domain expertise. You obviously have the power of AutoML behind the scenes with driverless AI. You have the power of model deployment. You have all the capabilities built in, but you can bring in your own custom data, start building more powerful domain-specific apps. And that's what we want to hope to, and we are building towards as well. So just an example of like what like a churn app could look like, right? So basically, you're using the Q framework with the SDK to quickly build an app, which has the benefit is has all the pre-built components available to use it. For example, easy way to view the data, to apply some decisioning on it. More importantly, you can then connect to the driverless AI to build the models and do retraining if needed, right? So it can kind of take the power of driverless AI or other, or H2 open source for that matter, to build rapidly build models and then provide a really nice interface for the end users to start taking advantage of it. So we started building a whole bunch of apps at the advent of COVID for our customers to help do things like demand sensing, help build peak prediction apps for customers who are trying to see how to staff their resources in different locations, or even for some of our healthcare customers who wanted to get a more accurate prediction app, but more importantly with some simulation thrown in so they can do some scenario planning. So all those kind of things are very easy to build and provide. And essentially, the goal is to have basically an app store for every enterprise, right? We think of every customer of ours or every large enterprise who, when they go through the maturity cycle, they can reach a stage where they can build basically a bunch of apps. They can obviously use the ones that we are bringing to the table. So, for example, these are all the apps that we built when COVID, at the event of COVID, right? So things like using looking at mortgage lending, for example, and seeing how that is impacted by COVID, or demand sensing. Supply chain, right? But essentially, customers can take that or repurpose it or build their own, for that matter. So we expect our customers to hopefully have their own internal app store with lots of custom apps for their own internal needs. So this one, maybe we'll just show a quick app demo.
I'm ready to do the demo.
Yeah.
So if we,
let me exit the screen and stop sharing, and you can take sharing then.
Sure. I'm just trying to get. Okay, here we go. are you able to see my screen okay, Vinod? So what I'm showing here is our H2AI sort of platform, where it's sort of the suite of the various tools. And as Vinod mentioned, we're gonna go through this demo. In the demo, it's gonna be around a lending app. And one of the interesting things about the AI apps, it's not just about the end results. It's how do I start and kind of walk people through the collecting of the data, the augmenting of the data, then walk through the process of, so we augment the data, we go through the process of building a model, right? Then once a model is being built, consuming that sort of back into the end user, right? So we're going to walk through these major steps. And so, I have this, this is sort of our interface for Q, and we have a whole collection of apps. And, we're going to start doing a whole series more of webinars to kind of go even deeper into this. So I have my different app catalog. I can have, and these are sort of going to walk you through a pre-existing app, but kind of show you what the art of the possible, right? So in this case, I have this lending app, and I'm going to dig into my lending app, right? And so as I dig into my lending app, I run it. It gives me an overview of how it works. So we're going to collect some additional sample loan information in Australia, and I want to enrich that, right? And I want to kind of go through that automatically enriching it and see how COVID is affecting loans, and how the demographics from census data is also sort of affecting loans, and enrich my data to find a better signal, right? So, and I want to do that in automated fashion. So what you see is sort of a collection of wizards that kind of walk you through the process, right? So I have some sample data, which I uploaded into the system, and I want to kind of go through a flow of augmenting the data. And so as I go through augmenting the data, it says, what data sources I want to use in this augmentation. They could be our own data sources, purchase data, third-party vendors, and I want to generate, an additional new sort of data set, right? So this is our webinar data set. And, I can have some flexibility of how I do the matching, and so it can sort of explore. And we actually have a next generation of this where, it says, go explore all of them. Tell me what, where do you find kind of matches? And of those, which ones you actually want to enrich and blend with your existing data set, right? So, there's this wizard. You can kind of go to the next step, say, which data sets you want to use. You select them, and then this automation is hoping where it's exploring the data sets, finding potential matches, and then it's going to start doing automatically the blending, right? So as we look at, sort of data prep, we really want to kind of look at sort of augmenting this whole sort of process, right? And leveraging machine learning to kind of make that process flow, right? So as we look at our next step, we have this, data that we've been able to enrich, right? And I want to then use that to build a model, right? And here, many of you may have seen some of our automatic machine learning capabilities. So I'm going to leverage driverless AI kind of to help and its AutoML capabilities to build a model. But for maybe a citizen data scientist who's not as sort of has so much expertise in all the different metrics and capabilities, or maybe an expert data scientist already pre-configured some of the basics, this allows them to potentially build a model in a much easier sort of manner, right? So I'm going to say, hey, I want to build, I'm going to give it my a name for it, right? I'm going to select, what's my target, whether they're going to default or not. And then I want to go ahead and go through the process of building a model. And so I can kind of set some basic settings around accuracy, time, and interpretability, and says go ahead and start an experiment, right? And that's actually going to connect over to driverless AI. It's going to share the data with it, and it's going to start going through the process of building the model, right? So, this is just sort of a sneak peek of what that kind of looks like. So if I can kind of go look into the experimentation process, here I just send over that, the process to kind of go ahead and build a model, and it's going through the process of, exploring the data, exploring different algorithms that it should leverage, exploring the shift between, maybe your training and test data set. So, and then, in about 35 seconds, here we have our first set of models. So each square down here is a model that's being created. Now, if you're just in the Q world, this is all transparent to you. If you're a data scientist and you want to dig into it, Driverless AI is an open and extensible automatic machine learning platform, and you can kind of get in there and fine tune the algorithms, the feature engineering, and enrich it with your own, right? So this is going to go through a process, and it's going to build a model sort of at the end, right? And so now that you got through the process of building a model, right, now you want to start looking at consuming that and going through some simulation. So now the end user wants to use this, right? So I want to use an existing model that was built. It says, hey, here's my augmented data that I want to leverage, right? The target column that I want to work with. And again, it's walking me through the steps of building out a solution. So, in here, I want to look at things like net income, in rate, COVID cases, right? So now I enrich the data with COVID cases. And I'm actually looking at two scenarios, right? And I want to pivot a couple of key factors, and I want to look at the overall outstanding balance, right? So now I can kind of go through the process of looking at these two scenarios. I can configure them so it says, hey, I want to look at the COVID cases. Let's say I kind of more concerned now says, hey, the COVID cases are going to go up. What is that going to do to my loans and default rates, right? So I can go ahead and says perform this action, and so it's configured the process. It's walked you through a flow. It's going to collect this incoming data. It's going to give inputs to it, the simulation that I'm giving it, and it's also going to take the machine learning model and score data with it, and then going to go present back the results in some kind of consumable dashboard, right? So as I look at the sort of results, I get this end dashboard where I kind of look at, hey, here's my model threshold. I can look at what's the percentage of bad loans that I'm potentially looking at, and kind of get all these different visualizations around COVID cases, interest rates, net income. Look at delinquency probability, right, for the counts and the overall counts. And then I can kind of also look at visualizations like the maps, right? So I want to look at defaults by state and by default rate and see where the different concentrations at. And so now I'm able to consume not just the data, but the insights from the machine learning in a consumable way. But I've done this in a very sort of automated, orchestrated fashion. And this is something just as the art of the possible. You can take this framework and build your own apps, right? So maybe you're interested in one of our existing apps, that's fantastic. Or maybe you're interested in using that as a template to build your own app, right? So that's a quick run through the demo, right? So, what did we do? We consumed some data, and then we started with our base data. We augmented that data with new data to find more signal. Then we went through an automated fashion to build a machine learning model. And then we configured the scenario, and lastly, we looked at some results, right? So as we look at sort of, this flow again, what we're really looking at is, how do we automate this end-to-end flow? And not just automate the sort of quote-unquote classic, data engineering, machine learning, and deployment of models, but kind of automate it, through that fashion and all the way to kind of building an application and integrating this all into that application sort of workflow, right? So, Vinod, I don't know if you had anything else more to add. Otherwise, we can kind of open it up.
No, that's good. Thank you, Raphael. That was a good sneak peek of what an app can look like, right? So imagine we can go to h2.ai/h2-q. You can see a bunch of other apps that have been listed, examples. So we're just getting started, right? So you want to build tons of these apps. So it's fun, maybe you have time for a few questions now. See if there are folks.
Yes, thank you, Vinod and Raphael. We are opening it up to questions, so please send your question. I'll start off with one that I see here. How would you suggest that our company AI enable our legacy packaged applications?
Yeah, great question, right? So I think the challenge with the legacy applications is typically that they have been built with maybe older stacks which are difficult to port or difficult to maintain, and enhanced, right? So we see these apps as one way to sort of, we want to be helping customers sort of migrate some of these apps. But more importantly, more than the apps, you can think of the original concept as a signal as a service, right? So some of these models can be available as APIs. So you can have basically a bunch of these microservices. So if you can, maybe we can even enhance existing apps with AI signals coming in. So that's another option. So definitely, we want to sort of crawl, walk, run, right? So take what you already have. If you have legacy applications, let's try to enhance them, put intelligence in there. If you can incorporate AI there through the use of APIs, let's do that. But if not, we can try to port those apps over, or at least slowly migrate them over to a bunch of these new age applications, which are easy to build, maintain, and also keep up to date.
Yeah, I think that the other thing is that, we probably need to really evaluate, like, where are you on your, machine learning journey, right? Have you already built some models? Maybe you want to start with just building some models and start with a much simpler sort of initial sort of application, and not try to like integrate it into an existing sort of legacy application, right? Or as maybe your first step in integrating into the legacy application, just look at sort of embedding this new AI app or new AI component into that existing application, right? So we're happy to work with you and talk to you and better understand your use case and understand where you are at in your journey, and then sort of collaborate with you on what might be the best step forward.
Great. Thank you. How do you suggest someone who is not familiar with AI should start learning about our products?
So I'll take that. One of the things that we've done recently is we have developed a whole new learning center, right? So we have some free courses around AI foundations and machine learning foundations. So this AI foundation course just completed this week, but it's still available via replay. So all the sessions were recorded, and there's a lot of rich content around getting started with AI. And the AI foundation is really geared towards sort of everyone, right? So you could be a developer, you could be a data scientist, you could be a business leader, and it tries to walk you through the basics of what is it, what are the type of problems you try to work with, introduce you to some of the concepts around machine learning, deep learning, working with AI and big data, responsible AI, machine learning operations, and this last one that this whole thing around apps. The other thing is that we are actually going to start the next version of it called Machine Learning Foundation that's going to get deeper into getting hands-on. So this one does assume that you have some R or Python experience, right? And so these two courses are free, or you're more than welcome to sort of explore everything else in the Learning Center. We also have a sort of collection of tutorials that you can kind of leverage.
Yeah, and in addition, I think all the, you can do this self-service, but also you can download the products and start playing with them. There are free licenses for everything. So I'd encourage you to go try out all the products. They're all available on the website.
Yeah, I think that goes into the next question, which is we are building prediction model for queue management. How can I explore to see data tools and AutoML features of H2O? Do you have a demo where I can test capability?
Absolutely.
So very much, I would kind of go to that Learning Center, right? Explore the driverless AI tutorials. We have a whole sort of learning path. These tutorials, the first one, the zero tutorial, gets you set up on a test drive, so we can get you up and running with an environment in under 15 minutes, right? And then you'll have an environment where you have driverless AI, it's a sample data, and then you can kind of start exploring these first three core tutorials where you learn the basics of driverless AI, learn how to explore some of the metrics, and even the third one, look at machine learning explanations and interpretability.
And more importantly, I think if you want to, based on the question, if you want to actually talk to someone on our side, we are happy to do that as well. So definitely reach out either through one of our support forums or contact us, fill up a form, and we are happy to jump on a call and walk through how we can solve the specific problem. Okay.
Perfect, yeah. And we have the free trial that you can click on up there on that button. So for the driverless AI trial, yeah, there we go. Next question would be, for enterprises, how do you come to the decision that AI is the approach needed to solve your problem?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't know if you're going to do with us in 2 minutes. Hopefully, the AI fundamentals course will give you some ideas on how to start thinking about it. But I think generally, I think with fundamentally the AI, I think, and you have to break it down to parts of what you're trying to do. So most likely, start with the work problem, and then see first of all if you have any data to solve it, right? And then if you have data, then and then you can start thinking about, can I get some signal from the data to answer the question? So it's about the AI we're talking about is about decision management today, right? So with enterprises, we are trying to help them make decisions or build experiences or do things using the data. So obviously, it's a much wider question, and highly encourage you to maybe read up our AI fundamentals to get a deeper sense of how if AI will fit to solve your problems.
Great, and I think we have one last question. Could you please explain about your Slack channels? How do you source data from hospitals and clinics for some of the models you create in terms of resources?
Yeah, I think the Slack channels are the community Slack channel. I think that's what probably the viewer is asking about. So we do have a community Slack channel. In addition to our H2O community, I think, Raphael, maybe you want to just show that as well very quickly. So that's the place for you to go and meet other folks in our community, interact, ask questions about our products, and get feedback. So I definitely encourage you to do that. Regarding the data sets you talked about, I think so. We, as part of our augmentation workflow, we source a bunch of data sets. These are mostly all open data sets published by different organizations. So these are we're right now sourcing data sets from the public domain, like the Johns Hopkins data set, other places for the COVID. So when you're helping with COVID modeling, we sourced a bunch of open data sets. In addition, we are also working with some of our data partners to source data sets from third-party proprietary vendors, which can be made available for end customers. So let us know if something is one of our data sets is interesting. We do manage and curate them, and they are available for augmentation for the users.
Great. I know it was the last question, but something popped up that I wanted to ask. How many models can it run at a time? Is there a max?
So it's really a function of how much hardware you have, how much and how big the data set is. So we have some guidance and guidelines on how many models it can run in parallel. Like I said, it's a function of how big the data set size is and how many concurrent experiments you want to run on the hardware, given hardware. So talk to us. We can help you figure out what's the best optimal setup for you.
Great, and I think that's all we have time for as far as questions. If there is a question that was not answered, please go to our website, h2o.ai, reach out, and we can answer those. I think there were some pricing questions, et cetera, so please do that. I wanted to say thank you to Vinod and Raphael for taking the time today and doing a great presentation. I'd also like to say thank you to everybody who joined us today. The presentation slides and recording will be made available after this presentation is over. Okay, everyone have a great rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day. Bye.